Welcome back, everyone. My name is Guy Edwards. I'm a UK and European patent attorney here at GJE. This is the second of 3 videos talking about how governments fund and support innovation. In our last video, I made the case for why governments should support innovative companies. And today we're going to be looking at how legislation can indirectly encourage research and development and support innovation across an industry. I'm going to be looking at 3 different case studies on how legislation, which doesn't directly fund any business, can encourage innovation in the field. So firstly, I'm sure if any of you have been looking at moving house or purchasing an appliance in the current lockdown, you'll have come across these energy efficiency ratings. And these are schemes we have in the UK for judging on the left how good your white goods, your fridge or your washing machine is in it energy-wise. And on the right, we have some energy efficiency ratings for houses. So when you're looking to buy a new house or rent a new house, estate agents will provide you with these details of how efficient the building is. And what these schemes provide is a metric by how we as consumers can judge the products we're buying. And what does that mean? It provides a real pressure on companies to improve the environmental efficiency of their product, so that we as consumers know they're achieving a good job. As a such, sellers are really incentivized by this metric to develop and innovate with their products, to stay ahead of the crowd, to push their way up these rating systems and achieve A's and B's rather than lagging down at the bottom in D's, E's and F. There's a clear pressure to innovate provided by this metric. In the second example, we'll talk about London taxis. I'm sure all of you will recognize the vehicle on the left. That's the traditional London taxi. It's been with us for years. What you might not have seen if you've not been in London for the last few years is that we've now got a new hybrid electric taxi that's now on the streets. And if you walk or cycle in London, you'll know that this is a massive improvement. These old vehicles that didn't have particularly fantastic engines are incredibly smoggy, and you could taste it on the air being in a big city. And what spurred this move from the old to the new is in 2018, Transport for London, who are in charge of London streets, brought in new taxi and private hire regulations, which required all new taxis to have zero emission capability, and it banned old diesel powered taxis that put out a lot of emissions. And these new rules were brought in an age before the growth of Tesla, before the arrival of many of the electric vehicles we're seeing on the roads today. Back in the mid 2010s, electric cars were more a sparkle in the eye rather than a physical reality. But with the requirement in place that all taxis needed to be zero emissions, companies innovated, and by setting this aggressive requirement, Transport for London encouraged the providers of taxis in the taxi business to innovate quicker than what we've seen in private business, and only now is private business really catching up with what we've had in London since 2018. And that, if you can see, we talked about in the previous video about this real push and pull about how society can really benefit from innovation more than an individual company can. This is an evidence of this in action. Until Transport for London required there to be electric vehicles, electric taxis, the industry wasn't interested in filling that niche. And only now do we as a community receive the benefits. Moving on, as our third example, what you can see here is a graph of patent publications for seatbelts in the US. So we're jumping across the pond here. And what you can see is that in the 80s and early 90s, the number of patents for seatbelts was very smooth. Isn't a big variation. What does that mean in reality? It means that there was some innovation in this field, but not masses. But then starting in 1995, we see this massive increase, this massive peak in what's happened. And clearly there's been a huge amount more innovation in the field of seatbelts from 1995 onwards. Then that's what's driving this increase in the number of patents that exist in the area. And obviously, when you look at a graph like this, you have to ask yourself, why is this? What are the drivers encouraging this? And again, which is not financially supporting companies to make better seatbelts, but rather lighter legislation that is that indirectly drives companies to improve their offering. And in this case, from the late 1980s to the early 1990s, the majority of US states brought in mandatory seatbelt laws. So seatbelts have been around for a long time, but it wasn't until the late 80s that US states started bringing in laws that said you had to wear them while you were driving. And in response, because everyone was wearing seatbelts, the auto industry realized, oh, we should probably make our seatbelts a bit more comfy, and oh, we should probably make our seatbelts a bit more safe. Because these laws came in requiring people to use seatbelts, the auto industry responded and made their seatbelts better. And you'll see similar improvements across other industries. When governments mandate improvements in safety, you suddenly see dramatic increases in safety as companies realize they must innovate to meet the new requirements. So, in summary, you don't need to directly fund innovation by giving funding out to companies, though we will be talking about that in our next video. But also, if governments set aggressive metrics, requirements, and goals in the form of indirect legislation, they can still encourage innovation because companies will innovate to achieve these goals. That's brought us to the end of this session. Stay tuned for our next video, talking about some of the more direct ways governments can fund innovation. And remember to give us a like and a subscribe.